We don't need a 60-year-old overseeing cybersecurity. The voice of that young director, Ethan Sawyer, still rings in my ears. He actually laughed when he said it, a sharp, dismissive sound that cut deeper than any insult. "Hand over your badge." And I did. I unclipped it from my lanyard, the plastic cool against my fingertips, and set it on the polished conference room table. I just let it go. Didn't say a word about the $17 million government contract, the one my security clearance was the only thing keeping alive. Didn't mention the avalanche they'd just triggered. Monday morning, sure enough, the Department of Defense terminated the deal. And suddenly, that laugh didn't sound quite so confident anymore. For 31 years, I built cybersecurity infrastructure for defense contractors. It started in the Air Force, doing signals intelligence, back when cybersecurity was just computer security and most people didn't know what a firewall was. I saw every attack imaginable, navigated the Morse worm, Code Red, NIMDA. Helped rebuild systems after the OPM breach. Every crisis, every close call, it taught me something. It made our systems stronger. For the last 22 of those years, I'd been the senior cybersecurity architect at Meridian Defense Solutions in Central Maryland. We were a mid-sized contractor, about 340 employees, handling sensitive network security for a host of government agencies. My specialty was classified systems integration, the kind of work that demanded a TS/SCI clearance with polygraph. It takes 2 years and $50,000 to get one of those, maybe 1.2 million Americans even have it. Mine? I'd held it for 28 years straight. Clean record, perfect compliance, never a single security incident on any system I'd touched. That clearance was tied to every major contract Meridian held, but most importantly, to the Sentinel program, that $17 million Department of Defense contract for monitoring across 3 military installations. The contract language was explicit, a TS/SCI cleared architect with at least 15 years of defense sector experience. That was me. Had been me for 7 years. Everyone who mattered knew it. Then the original CEO retired. His replacement, Walter Reed, a 52-year-old with an MBA and no technical background, came in with fresh blood and digital transformation. He hired Ethan Sawyer, 28, a computer science grad from a state school with 4 years at an Austin, Texas startup. No government experience, no security clearance, no clue how defense contracting actually worked. But Ethan had energy. He had the buzzwords, AI integration, zero trust, cloud native. Walter loved him. Ethan started in early March. He swaggered around, introducing himself, talking about disrupting the status quo. He found me reviewing network segmentation protocols. Leaned against my doorframe, casual, confident. He said he wanted to pick my brain. I offered to walk him through anything. He nodded, like he expected nothing less, then glanced around my office. My framed certifications, the stack of manuals, my Air Force commendation plaque from '94. "Interesting setup you've got here," he said. "Very retro." I let it go. Figured he was just young. The following weeks were revealing. Ethan scheduled back-to-back meetings, asked a lot of questions, took a lot of notes. Made a lot of promises about streamlining. He started making changes. Replaced our ticketing system, restructured reporting lines. He wanted to sunset our on-premise backups for cloud storage. Eliminate manual verification in incident response. Outsource overnight monitoring to Southeast Asia. Each proposal came with slick presentations, ROI calculations, industry comparisons. What they didn't show was context. The classified data that couldn't legally leave our physical control. The manual verification steps required by 3 separate contracts. The foreign nationals who couldn't get the clearances needed for outsourcing. I raised these concerns, politely, professionally, with documentation. Ethan would nod, thank me for my institutional perspective, then move forward anyway, just modified enough to avoid the most obvious violations. The old guard, folks who'd been doing this work for decades. We saw survival where Ethan saw bureaucracy. We saw protection where he saw resistance. In April, he submitted his big proposal, a complete overhaul, cloud migration, AI threat detection. It would save $2.3 million annually. The proposal was technically impressive and completely impossible. Half the systems couldn't be migrated due to data residency. The AI tools weren't FedRAMP certified. The automation would violate human verification protocols. I pointed this out in the review meeting. Calmly, professionally, with contract citations. Ethan's expression flickered, then he smiled. Said we were letting legacy thinking limit our potential. Walter nodded along. Said he trusted Ethan to find creative solutions. The meeting ended. Ethan didn't look at me. 2 weeks later, I was called into Walter's office. Ethan was there. Brenda from HR, too. Never a good sign. Walter said they were restructuring, flattening hierarchies, eliminating redundant positions. My position was being eliminated. 31 years. 22 at this company. Perfect performance reviews. 0 security incidents. 3 commendations from government clients. And they were cutting me loose because a 28-year-old thought I was redundant. I looked at Walter, the man I'd helped navigate 3 major compliance crises. The company I'd protected during the 2019 contractor breach that took down 2 competitors. And then Ethan spoke, his voice measured, but smug. He said the cybersecurity landscape had evolved, they needed people who could adapt to modern paradigms. Said my skill set was valuable, but no longer aligned. Then he said it, the line I'll remember forever, we don't need a 60-year-old overseeing cybersecurity. He actually laughed. Like my age was the whole argument. Like 6 decades of life experience and 3 decades of specialized expertise were disqualifications. Walter shifted, uncomfortable, but silent. Brenda stared at her notepad. No one defended me. No one pushed back. Ethan leaned forward. Hand over your badge. So I did. I unclipped it. Set it on the desk. Didn't say a word about the Sentinel contract. Didn't mention my TS/SCI clearance was its lifeblood. Didn't explain that terminating the cleared architect of record required 90 days notice to the contracting officer, per section 4.7.2. They hadn't asked, and I wasn't doing free consulting for people who just fired me. Brenda handed me a folder. Severance terms. 2 months' pay. I signed everything, shook hands, and walked out. My desk was already being cleared. Mark Thompson, my deputy for 11 years, caught me in the hallway. What happened? Restructuring. Ethan's vision doesn't include people like me. Mark's jaw tightened. That's insane. You're the only one who, I know what I am. I put a hand on his shoulder. You know where to find me. I walked out of Meridian Defense Solutions at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday. 31 years. 22 of loyalty. Gone in a 15-minute meeting. My wife, Elaine, was in the garden when I got home. She saw my face and knew. Didn't ask questions. Just made dinner and let me decompress. That night, I sat on the back porch, watched the sun go down. Thought about calling a lawyer. Fighting back. Then I thought about Ethan's laugh and Walter's silent nod. Some battles aren't worth fighting. Some, you just walk away from and let the consequences do the work. I'd given them everything they needed to destroy themselves. They just didn't know it yet. Saturday morning, I slept in. No alarm, no urgent emails. Elaine made pancakes. We ate on the back porch. She asked what I wanted to do. I said I didn't know. Probably rest, then figure out the next chapter. She didn't ask why I seemed so calm. 35 years of marriage, she knew me well enough to recognize processing versus panic. This was processing. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Text from Mark. Short. Chaos here. Ethan just realized something about the DoD contract. Won't say more, but thought you should know. I didn't respond. The dominoes were falling. Here's what Ethan and Walter didn't understand about government contracting: every major defense contract has key personnel clauses. They name specific individuals whose qualifications and clearances are essential. Remove them without proper notification, and you breach the contract. The Sentinel contract had three: the program manager, Sandra the lead systems engineer, and the cybersecurity architect of record. That last one was me. Section 4.7.2 was explicit. Any change required written notification to the contracting officer at least 90 days in advance, with justification, replacement credentials, and a transition plan. The contracting officer had sole discretion to approve. Ethan fired me on a Friday with zero notice to anyone. No notification to the DoD, no replacement, no plan. He'd also created another problem: the contract required continuous active status for the architect. A gap, even one day, triggered review. If the gap exceeded 72 business hours without remediation, termination for cause. I'd learned all this over 22 years. Ethan had learned none of it in his 4 years at an Austin startup. By Sunday evening, I had 17 missed calls from Meridian numbers. I let them all go. Monday morning, the phone rang again. A number I recognized. Charles Davis, the DoD contracting officer for Sentinel. I answered. Mr. Hayes. His voice was tense. I've just been informed of your departure from Meridian Defense Solutions. I told him that was accurate. He paused. Did you resign or were you terminated? Terminated. Friday afternoon. Position eliminated. Another pause. Longer this time. Mr. Hayes, are you aware of the key personnel requirements under Sentinel? I told him I was very aware. Have Meridian notified us of this personnel change? You'd have to ask Meridian that, Mr. Davis. I wasn't privy to their communications after my termination. Charles sighed. Heavy, tired. Mr. Hayes. We received no notification. No replacement credentials. No transition documentation. As of this moment, Meridian is in material breach of Section 4.7.2. I expressed my sympathies. Hoped they could work it out. 20 minutes later, another call. Walter Reed. I let it go. His message was frantic. Misunderstanding. Urgently needed to discuss. My expertise was invaluable. Translation: they realized they were about to lose $17 million, and I was their only hope. I didn't call back. By Monday afternoon, I had 3 voicemails from Ethan. Each one more desperate. The first was professional, an administrative oversight. The second, apologetic, he hadn't fully understood the implications. The third was practically begging. He'd personally recommend reinstating me at my previous salary, plus 15%, if I'd come back immediately. Funny how fast 60-year-olds stop being obsolete when your contract is on the line. I forwarded them to my personal email. Went back to my newspaper. Tuesday morning, the official notification. A registered letter from the Department of Defense. Meridian Defense Solutions was in material breach. 48 hours to cure, or face immediate termination. My phone rang 18 times that day. I answered none of them. Wednesday morning, Mark Thompson showed up at my house. He looked like he hadn't slept. Arthur? He stood on my porch, defeated. They're going to lose the contract. I invited him in, made coffee, let him talk. Monday had been pandemonium. Ethan discovered the clause around 10 a.m. when the DoD started asking questions. Spent 2 hours insisting it couldn't be enforced. Then 4 hours trying to find a replacement architect with a TS/SCI clearance and 15+ years. Turns out, those don't grow on trees. Every qualified candidate was employed or required a 6-month clearance transfer. Ethan even called a headhunting firm, asked if they could fast-track a clearance. The recruiter laughed. Hung up. Walter confronted Ethan in front of the entire leadership team. Demanded to know why he hadn't researched the contract. Ethan tried to blame HR. Brenda reminded everyone she'd sent him a summary of key personnel designations his first week. Ethan claimed he never got it. The email log said otherwise. Opened. Attachments downloaded. He'd even replied with a thumbs up emoji, got it, will review. He never reviewed it. Just filed it away because compliance documentation was boring legacy thinking. By Tuesday, they were desperate. Called contractors, headhunters, former employees. They found 3 candidates nationwide. 1 retiring. 1 with a non-compete. 1 couldn't start for 90 days. The 48-hour cure period was impossible. Mark finished his coffee. They're going to offer you anything to come back. Walter authorized up to double your previous salary, plus a signing bonus. Ethan's been told to apologize in person. I set my cup down. Mark, I appreciate you coming here, but I signed a severance agreement. They paid me to leave quietly. I left quietly. This is different. The whole company is at stake. 340 people could lose their jobs. I felt that one. Those employees hadn't done anything wrong. They were caught in the blast radius of Ethan's arrogance and Walter's negligence. But that wasn't my responsibility anymore. I told Mark I'd think about it. He nodded. Didn't push. Just left. Elaine found me on the porch that evening. She'd heard enough calls to piece things together. What are you going to do? I haven't decided yet. She sat next to me. That many people losing their jobs. That's a lot of weight. It is. But they didn't care about my 31 years when they decided. I was too old to matter. Why should I care about their problems now? She didn't have an answer. Neither did I. Thursday morning, a call from someone I didn't expect, Eleanor Vance, Meridian's chief legal counsel. We'd worked together for 15 years. Respected each other. Arthur, her voice was measured, lawyer calm. I know you have no obligation, but I hope you'll hear me out. I told her I'd listen. She laid it out plainly. Sentinel was terminating at midnight Friday unless they demonstrated immediate remediation. No other contract could absorb the loss. 180 layoffs within 60 days. She understood my anger. She'd reviewed my termination. Found it deeply troubling. Ethan acted without authorization. Walter failed in his oversight. Then the pitch, full reinstatement. 2.5 times your previous salary. 3-year guaranteed contract. Formal written apology from Ethan Sawyer. A seat on the advisory board. I let the silence stretch. We're also prepared to remove Ethan from any supervisory role over you. You'd report directly to Walter. The same Walter who'd sat there and let Ethan fire me. Eleanor paused. Walter has reconsidered his leadership approach. I told her I needed time. She said the deadline was midnight Friday. I understood deadlines. After she hung up, I sat with it. The offer was substantial. More than substantial. It was an acknowledgement they were catastrophically wrong. But being publicly humiliated by someone who thought your age made you worthless, money doesn't erase that. Titles don't erase that. Even apologies don't. Ethan had laughed. Like it was a joke. Like 6 decades of life and 31 years of expertise were punchlines. I called my daughter, Sarah, in Denver. Data analyst. Smart kid. She listened to the whole story. Dad, what do you actually want here? I want to never see Ethan Sawyer's face again. Okay. What else? I want them to understand that experience matters. You can't just throw away decades of knowledge chasing some fantasy about innovation and youth. I want them to feel what it's like to need something they casually discarded. She paused. But do you want to go back? Actually work there again? Wake up every morning and walk into that building knowing what they did? I thought about it. The building. My desk. The 1,000 problems solved. The people mentored. The systems built. The coffee machine only I knew how to fix. Then I thought about Ethan in the next office. Walter in the corner suite. The HR meeting. The laugh. No, I said. I don't think I do. Then don't, she said, simple, obvious. They made their choice, Dad. Now they get to live with it. You don't owe them a rescue. What about the other employees? What about them? Did any of them stand up for you in that meeting? Did anyone push back on Ethan's restructuring? Mark did afterward. Afterward doesn't count. If they wanted you there, they should have fought for you when it mattered. She had a point. A hard one. But a point. I called Eleanor back Thursday evening. Appreciated the offer. Not interested. She was quiet. Arthur, you understand what this means? I understand your company made a decision, and now they're experiencing the consequences. That's not my responsibility to fix. 300 people will blame Ethan and Walter, not me. I didn't fire myself, Eleanor. I didn't ignore contract requirements. I didn't laugh at someone's age. She didn't have a response. Is there anything that would change your mind? I thought about it. I'd consider consulting short-term. Enough to help you find a qualified replacement and manage the transition. But not as an employee. Not under Ethan. And not under the terms we discussed. She asked what terms I wanted. Full autonomy. Consulting rate of $450 an hour, minimum 6-month engagement, regardless of contract outcome. And a written acknowledgement that my termination was improper, distributed to all employees. She said she'd take it to Walter. Friday morning, 20 hours until Sentinel terminated. Walter called me personally at 7 a.m. First time we'd spoken directly since the termination. Arthur. His voice was rough, stressed. I've reviewed your consulting proposal. We accept all terms. Eleanor's drafting the agreement now. Can you come in this morning? I said I'd be there by 10. Walking back into Meridian felt strange. The same parking lot, security desk, elevator. But everything was different. The looks from employees. Some sympathetic, some confused, some openly hostile. Ethan's loyalists. Eleanor met me, walked me to a conference room. The agreement was printed. 12 pages. I read every word, signed every page. Eleanor countersigned. Now, I said, putting down the pen. Let's talk about saving your contract. The next 3 hours were a crash course in everything Ethan had ignored. I walked them through the key personnel requirements, notification timelines, cure provisions. The only path, a formal request to Charles Davis for an emergency extension. We needed to demonstrate a qualified replacement was in process, with a detailed transition timeline. I knew 2 people who might qualify. Both retired, but potentially willing to unretire for the right terms. I made calls, sent emails, pulled in favors I'd been saving for 15 years. By 4 p.m., we had a candidate. David Miller. 63 years old. TS/SCI cleared. 28 years of defense cybersecurity experience. Retired 18 months ago, but bored. He could start in 2 weeks. I drafted the emergency extension request myself. Detailed the circumstances, acknowledged the breach, presented the remediation plan with David's credentials and my interim oversight. Charles Davis reviewed it personally. Called me at 8 p.m. Arthur. This is highly irregular. The whole situation is highly irregular, Charles. I'm trying to minimize damage for everyone. He was quiet. I can grant a 45-day extension contingent on verified progress. If Miller's clearance transfer hits any delays, we'll need to revisit. I thanked him. Meant it. The contract survived. Barely. Another 24 hours and it would have been dead. I sent the confirmation to Eleanor at 8:47 p.m. She responded, "Thank you." That night, Elaine and I sat on the back porch again. I told her about the day. She shook her head. "You spent 10 hours fixing a problem they created by firing you." I did. How does that feel? Complicated. Satisfying in some ways, frustrating in others. But I didn't do it for Walter. Didn't do it for Ethan. Did it for the 300 people who needed jobs, and the 20 years of relationships I'd built with colleagues who deserved better. And I did it on my terms, at my rate, with my name cleared and my value documented. That matters more than revenge. The next 6 weeks were educational for everyone. I came in 3 days a week. Set my own hours. Reported to no one. Ethan avoided me like I was radioactive. He'd study his phone like it contained classified information, which, professionally speaking, I kind of was. The guy who'd almost cost the company everything. David Miller's clearance transfer came through on schedule. He was good. Thorough. Knew the rhythms. Never once suggested compliance was bureaucracy. We had lunch his first week. Swapped war stories. "This is how it's supposed to work," he said. Experience teaching experience. I agreed. Wished Ethan had understood that. I spent most of my consulting hours documenting processes that existed only in my head. 22 years of institutional knowledge converted into procedures. The vendor relationships, the compliance shortcuts that weren't shortcuts, the historical context. It should have been done years ago. Would have been, if Ethan hadn't decided documentation was overhead. The employees noticed the shift. People who'd been afraid to speak up started asking questions again. Mark Thompson stopped by my temporary office. "Ethan's losing support." He looked hopeful. "The board is asking questions." I'd heard similar things. Corporate survival instincts. When a $17 million contract nearly evaporates, people look for someone to blame. Ethan was the target. But Walter had enabled him. Had hired him without proper vetting. Approved the restructuring without checking contract implications. Had sat there silently while Ethan laughed. 3 weeks into my consulting, Walter announced Ethan Sawyer was transitioning to a special projects role. No longer IT director. Just working on undefined initiatives. Ethan's LinkedIn updated that day, innovation strategist. Same company, different reality. He never apologized to me directly. The written apology from Eleanor came from HR, corporate language. Zero personal accountability. I framed it anyway. Hung it next to my Air Force commendation. Week 5 brought another development. The board hired an outside firm to audit Meridian's contract compliance. Standard response to a near miss. They found 17 other contracts with key personnel gaps or notification issues. Nothing as severe as Sentinel, but problems that would surface. Ethan's fingerprints were on most of them. His restructuring moved people without checking contractual constraints. His push for efficiency eliminated legally required documentation. His assumption that government contracting worked like Austin startups created a minefield of violations. The audit report was devastating. 63 pages. Walter tried to spin it as institutional issues. The auditors had included a section specifically addressing that defense. Most problems were created in the past 9 months. All traceable to specific decisions made by Ethan, approved by Walter. Within 48 hours, the board announced Walter Reed was stepping down to pursue other opportunities. Code 4, you're fired. His replacement was someone I knew, Christine Evans, the COO for 12 years. Solid, experienced. Understood government contracting. Her first act as CEO was to call me. Arthur, what happened to you was wrong. Not just procedurally, ethically. I appreciated that. I also want you to know that Ethan's special projects role is ending. He's being terminated for cause, based on the audit findings. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Finally, I want to offer you something. Not reinstatement, I know you're not interested, but a permanent consulting arrangement. Advisory role on all major contract decisions. Your rate, your hours, your terms. I told her I'd think about it. This time, I meant it. Christine was different. She earned her position through decades of competence, not MBA credentials. She understood age meant experience. The Friday of my last official consulting week, Ethan Sawyer appeared in my doorway. First time he'd approached me since taking my badge. He looked diminished. Smaller. The confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked like humility. Mr. Hayes, do you have a minute? I gestured to the chair. He sat down. I wanted to apologize. His voice was quieter. Not for the company letter. Personally. For what I said in that meeting. I waited. Let him sit in the silence. I was arrogant. He finally looked up. I thought I understood this industry because I understood technology. Turns out technology is maybe 20% of what actually matters here. The other 80% is relationships and compliance and institutional knowledge. Things that take decades to build. True. He swallowed. The age comment. That was inexcusable. I looked at your experience and saw something outdated instead of seeing what it actually was. I was wrong. I studied him. Genuine growth, or a calculated attempt to improve his reputation? Maybe both. Ethan, I appreciate the apology. Genuinely. But here's what I want you to understand. He nodded, listening. When you laughed about my age, you weren't just insulting me. You were dismissing everything I'd built. Every late night solving problems, every crisis averted, every relationship cultivated over 30 years. You reduced all of that to a number and decided it made me worthless. He looked down again. That's not something an apology fixes. That's something you carry. And hopefully it changes how you approach people in the future. Because somewhere out there is another 60-year-old with 30 years of knowledge that you're going to need someday. And how you treat that person will define who you actually are. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up. Thank you for hearing me out. He walked out. I never saw him again. 2 weeks later, I heard he'd landed at a mid-size consulting firm in the Pacific Northwest. Lower title, lower salary. Building back from scratch. Some lessons you have to learn the hard way. 6 months after my termination, things looked very different. Christine Evans had stabilized Meridian. The Sentinel contract was renewed for another 3 years, with David Miller as architect. The compliance audit led to comprehensive reforms. I accepted Christine's consulting offer. 8 hours a week, advisory role on contract strategy and key personnel decisions. My rate stayed at $450 an hour. One afternoon, Christine called me into her office. "We're considering a new IT director." She slid a resume across the desk. I reviewed it. 46 years. Old, government background, 8 years at a different defense contractor, 0 Austin experience. Looks solid. She hired him the following week. Michael Green. First thing he did was schedule one-on-ones with every senior technical employee. Second, he read every active contract cover to cover. Third, he asked me to lunch. "I hear you're the reason this company still exists," he said over sandwiches. "I'm the reason the Sentinel contract still exists. The company existing was a side effect." He laughed. "Fair enough. I also heard about the guy before me, Ethan Sawyer." "Yeah." Michael shook his head. "I looked him up. He's at some consulting firm in Oregon now. Junior role. Barely making 6 figures. Sounds about right." Michael leaned back. "You know what's funny? I applied for the IT director job here 8 months ago, before Ethan got it. They passed on me because I didn't have enough innovative vision. I set my sandwich down." "You're kidding." "Nope. HR told me my background was too traditional. They wanted someone who could modernize the department. And now here you are. And now here I am, cleaning up the mess that modernization created." 3 months later, I got a letter in the mail. Formal correspondence from the Department of Defense. Commendation for my role in preserving the Sentinel contract, signed by Charles Davis personally. I framed it. Hung it next to the corporate apology letter and the Air Force plaque. A week after that, Mark Thompson got promoted to senior systems engineer. He called to tell me. Christine said she wanted people with institutional knowledge in leadership positions. He sounded emotional. "She said you recommended me." "I did." "You earned it, Mark. Just do the job right." "That's all the thanks I need." The following month, Meridian won a new contract. $23 million over 5 years, cybersecurity infrastructure for a different military branch. Charles Davis had recommended us based on how we'd handled the Sentinel crisis. Christine called me. "Arthur, we got it." "Congratulations." "No," she paused. "Thank you." The DoD specifically cited our crisis response and transition planning as factors. "That was your work." "I just did what needed doing." "You did more. You could have walked away. Let us fail. Nobody would have blamed you." "Maybe not. But 300 people would have lost their jobs." She was quiet. "I want to put your name on the new contract. As a senior advisor, paid position. Full benefits if you want them." I told her I'd think about it. That evening, Elaine and I had dinner on the back porch. I told her about the new contract, the offer, the commendation. She smiled. "So, what are you going to do?" "Probably take the advisor position. Work a few more years. Help them build something that'll last after I'm gone. And then retire for real. Travel. Spend time with the grandkids when Sarah gets around to having some." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Sounds like a plan." Isn't it amazing how sometimes the very thing meant to break you ends up being the catalyst for everything falling perfectly into place?